In order to make corbels, I had to come up with a plan. I researched shapes and sizes to get a general idea of my design. I then used graph paper to create a shape for the pattern. I definitely wanted a strong pattern since I was planning on making several corbels. So I traced the paper template on a 1/4-inch plywood that I can cut out with a bandsaw. I chose 2x10 lumber for my corbels and shelf. We wanted a farmhouse style look, so the lumber will be lightly sanded and eventually painted with a final distressed sanded application. I traced my pattern on the board, making sure it was positioned with the wood grain going vertical from top to bottom. The traced end was then cut to a manageable size so it could be easily handled. Using a bandsaw, the shape was then carefully cut out. Even though the bandsaw cuts were fairly smooth, I did notice some imperfections that needed to be sanded. Using a sanding drum on my drill press, the edges were dressed up before taking it to the router table. I chose a 45-degree router bit that I would use to shape the edges that would be exposed once installed. I didn't want too fancy of an edge since I was going for a simple farmhouse design. Next, I used 1x3 lumber for the back and top of the corbels. I measured and marked the dimensions using the shaped piece as a guide. Make sure the top of the corbel is equal or shorter in length than the depth of the shelf. Mark and cut, making sure one end was mitered at a 45-degree angle. Fit the pieces together to figure the next measurement. The 1x's should extend out far enough to add support and offer a plane for a mounting screw. Once the pieces are cut, I check their dimensions by fitting them together. Use these pieces as patterns for the rest of the corbels and router them to match the shaped piece. Note that you should plan which edges will be routered and which will be kept square for the desired look. The pieces can now be glued and assembled together. I find the best method for assembly is to secure them using 18-gauge brad nails. After assembling all the corbels, let the glue cure for at least 24 hours. The hanger hardware can then be installed. My hardware of choice are keyhole hangers. I made a special effort to measure and mark the position on each corbel so that the placement was the same on each unit. This should be done a couple inches from the top on the wall side of each corbel. Trace out the keyhole hardware on each corbel in order to accomplish the following step. Using a router, I set the depth of my bit to countersink the hangers into the corbel. Router an area a little larger than the size of the hardware, and then check for fit. Then, once again, retrace the keyhole and screw positions. Using a Forstner bit, I bored a shallow hole at the mounting site in order to make the keyhole easier to receive the wall screw. The keyhole hangers were then installed on each corbel. And finally, I centered a mark on the lower wall plate and drilled a hole using a Craig jig bit. This bit allows me to countersink the screw when mounting to the wall. The corbels at this point are now ready to receive a finish. We finished with a chalk paint that was distressed with sandpaper and then rubbed over with a wax product to make it look distressed. Once the finish is cured, the corbels can be hung on the wall and topped with a shelf.